Hello and welcome to Tao Radio.
Thanks for joining us. This is Mona and
Leah.
And we're here to take you on a journey with us while we explore the great sounds, music, arts, and cultures from all around the world. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our conversation with Geoffrey Chambers. After we recorded our first session, we all felt there was much more to say. So I met with Geoffrey again, alone this time, as Leah was walking in Nepal. I shared with him experiences of my road trip and travels with Habibi. This led us to a discussion of the ideas of home that we hold, what belonging is, and how that is played out in political folklore to huge destabilizing effect. We landed, as we had hoped to, back in the realm of personal folklore and the home of the artist. Me getting the dog, this small animal, literally transformed my life. From forays into green spaces in the city, then wider afield, then exploring the UK, then throwing the dog in the back of a car and doing 70,000 miles in a year. I avoided the cities. We were going to places of nature where I knew she would be happy. But of course, she was leading me to places where I would be so happy, right?
So how long are you going to be in the Cotswolds?
Just a week. And then I'm back to London to finish selling my flat and starting a new life. No clue yet. I'm trying to figure it out. I feel like it's going to crystallize itself very shortly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in England, you think?
Yeah, in England. And then I'm exploring this idea of buying land in northern Greece. I love the idea during this trip that I did for the year, right? So I did a lot of trusted house sitting and then staying with friends and doing Airbnbs. And I stayed in modest dwellings and I stayed in mansions, truly a manse in Scotland, right? And then I realized that my footprint was the same. Wherever it was literally the size of a small one-bedroom apartment, but I wanted the space outside. So I started to explore concepts of things like, smaller dwellings, the tiny house movement. And in effect, people always lived like that. Even if you think in olden times, people lived in large houses, they weren't by themselves. There were so many people there. So each one had a small apartment or a room, right? So actually, when it becomes more than that, you don't really need it. It just becomes excessive. You run around in circles.
I think George Carlin says it. Everyone needs a small space, but the only time you need more space is to house your things. And if you don't have the things, then you don't need the space.
Yeah, this concept of home is becoming very interesting for me. I'm reading this book right now called Philosophy of the Home.
Okay.
And it talks about the home being the place where morality actually sits, the space that we can, that we conduct everything in terms of our abode. And how that's not necessarily the walls, or it's us. The clearer we become ourselves, the more that concept of home starts to emerge even deeper. It's an interesting book because when I was doing this road trip, what was really interesting, I became clearer to myself. So I was my home.
Right. There's a book with Portable Paradise. It's by Roger Robertson. This is about a road trip.
Really?
Yeah, Paradise. It's about a road trip around England and the sort of perception and home and things like, belonging to places and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of those questions were really clear because I don't think I was running away from something, but I wanted to run towards myself. It was a sort of inflection that happened in my life and kind of saying, well, what am I doing? I'm not enjoying the things that I'm doing right now. I need to get clear. And when you're driving from one place to the other, all you have is you.
Yeah. What kind of vehicle do you have?
It's a 4-wheel drive car. The back seat is all my dog's abode. She takes care of that. And then everything I needed was in the trunk.
Right.
From food, clothes, musical instruments, art supplies, books. I mean, I had about over 100 books with me. And it was interesting because every time I had an idea, I'd go back and I somehow had pre-selected the kind of books that I would need without even realizing I was doing it.
Wow.
So I had my working library with me.
That's amazing because, if you're on the road and you're carrying, we've just moved studios and paper and books are so heavy. So, if you think of the fuel cost of transporting like 100 books along with you in the journey. It's almost like another person.
It's another person for sure. But then these are the elements, I guess, when you talk about the extension of the objects, fine tuning those things that you need with you. That was my kind of home as well, is in that relationship to and everything I use.
And did you pick up new books along the way?
A little bit. There were some bookshops that I stopped in and I did add to my little shelf of books in the back of the truck. Not many really.
And how long?
It was more or less a year or a few months where I had to stop back in London and travel to see my parents.
Yeah.
But I drove throughout most of the UK, except for Northumberland and North Scotland, the northeast of Scotland. And that's not including Ireland. And then through France, down around France, through Le Mans, the Loire Valley, Bordeaux, down to the Pyrenees, drive through southwest France to Italy, all the way down Italy.
Wow.
Then to Greece, to Antiparos, a small island, and then all the way back through Italy, Austria, all of Germany.
Wow.
Sweden, Denmark.
Did you knew the end point and you were going to get there?
I had some people I was going to visit.
Okay.
But they were kind of, oh, I'm going to go visit you around this time. But I left it loose in between because it was just me and the dog. And if I didn't like a place, I'd move on.
Right.
Or someone would tell me you have to stop somewhere. So I remember when I was at La Foix in the Southern Pyrenees area, I met this woman, an artist, in this cafe, in this patisserie, and she said, you have to go to Saint-Baume. And I'm like, all right. And that was where Mary Magdalene left Jerusalem to go to Marseille, and they sent her, the mayor of Marseille had given her this land where she had her monastery.
Mary Magdalene of the Bible.
Yes. And there were some parts of this trip where you can sense the energy of the place. And you can tell it from my dog. Habibi would refuse to get back in the car, would refuse. It was as if she was just dragged into the earth. She was so strong, I couldn't even lift her. And Saint-Baume was one of those places. And I wouldn't have known unless I had this chance meeting with this woman. It was an incredible place. Mesmeric energy. You could feel like it was pulsing.
And what made you go? Just enough of the London, enough of the background noise, and that's it. I'm going to do something radically different.
Yeah, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something that was true to the way that I grew up as well. We lived in many places, but I wanted to do it on my own terms. Also wanted to explore this home of mine, England. You know, I was born here, but we never lived here. But then I came back and I lived in London. So I was British, but I wasn't really, because I had no clue what Britain was.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the overriding feeling for most people who are Londoners. Londoners, they're not British or English. In the same way that people who are in New York are New Yorkers, they're not Americans. You know, they really identify with the city, not the country. I imagine most New Yorkers feel quite dislocated outside of New York.
I wonder how many of them have left New York. So yeah, definitely kind of going back to those natural elements in myself of adventure and curiosity and intrigue and, you know, escape, and really cultivating that confidence to do these things again by myself, because it's also an acknowledgement that, you know, I might not have a life partner. Why am I waiting to get started on doing things? Get on with it.
Yeah. And it's not that, once you start, it's not that scary, is it?
Yeah. And people would say, oh my God, that's so courageous. Weren't you frightened? So I was like, it's not like I was doing the whole trip at once. I was going from one destination to the next, which was only a few hours away. So actually, it wasn't such a big deal.
I mean, that's the thing about once you leave England as well. Most countries are 3 or 4 hours away, if you really look at it that way. England's a funny place, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but you're really moving from a small village to another small village, or from a small village to a small town. That's it.
And once you've figured out where you're going to stay, that's the main decision done.
That's it.
And then it's, what am I going to eat?
Yeah. Having the dog was a wonderful thing, because I think people want to meet each other. They want to meet each other with compassion, but they're so accustomed and habituated to meet with suspicion. right? Especially me going into some of these areas as a Black woman driving the car, but then they look in the back and then the dog's head comes out and suddenly it's delight. Then it's curiosity. Then it's surprise, surprise and curiosity together. And then it's, they want to know more and come here and why don't you go there? And before long.
And do you feel that the cultural barriers were much easily broached with the dog?
Yeah, definitely. And also traveling as a single person. It's a single person with a dog, because if you're traveling with as a couple or more, then people see you as a unit that it's hard to speak to. So I think there was a sense of care that was introduced.
You didn't have customs problems because you obviously had the dog passport chipped and all the.
No, I think it was really just traveling, girl with dog. It was just curiosity and delight. And she's cute. So everyone just liked her. And suddenly people had like dog treats in their pocket. And it was just funny.
Oh, that's amazing. It's amazing that because you do hear the stories of Black women traveling and the receptions. I mean, you didn't make it to the Eastern countries where it's obviously a very different thing anyway. But that's wonderful. It's a wonderful adventure.
And the more south you went, the more the reception was warm. So in Italy and Greece, you can take the dog wherever you wanted. But as you went north and north in the Nordic country, you could see the kind of organizational thing coming in. Your dog not allowed.
Okay. So there were fewer spaces in the northern. So I don't think some countries they'd allow a dog in a restaurant, right?
In Greece, they'd just be happy to just have the dog anywhere.
Right. And Sweden's not the same.
No.
Interesting. Very interesting. So once you've sold, you started talking about northern Greece. Do you plan to kind of wend your way there to just scout it out a bit more?
Absolutely. I want to go look at it. And so what I started saying is that I'm looking to get a concept of land, but in a kind of communal way. So with these smaller dwellings, that if someone else wants to come, they can build their tiny house there. So we can have a system of actually everyone having their privacy, but also these little dwellings in a piece of land.
Imagine as long as you've got sort of your basic utilities, you're fine.
Exactly. And then, I mean, a lot of these smaller houses anyways, they're very eco-conscious. They have their solar panels and so a lot of that stuff is already kind of built into the designs now.
Right. And I suppose compared to a flat in London, it's ridiculously affordable.
Completely affordable.
But would you have the problem of being a Britisher? A Britisher, you can't stay in Europe for so long.
But I mean, I think that's okay for me because I'd stay there for a little while, go travel for a little while, come back for a little while. And I think, who knows, in the same way that we left and we may return. So all of this is all temporary.
You won't be.
The return to sense.
Well, if it's anything like what's going on in America, then with the hissy fit, and they continue with the American hissy fit, we'll be in Europe next week. The special relationship, whatever that was, will be done. I think it's going to be done with everyone, really.
Well, the narrative of the American story, it's in its infancy, and it's a child's tantrum at the moment. And they need to get to grips with that and really start to reformulate their vision for their country.
I don't know. I kind of feel as if the American century is over and the whole world used to be China, as much as they don't like to admit it. The whole world was China, and we're returning that way.
Watch this space, huh?
I think so. It's China turned inwards. It didn't look at the rest of the world for quite a long time.
Yeah, for centuries, really.
And deliberately that China first policy. But now they don't have a legacy of colonialism in the West like that, or in Africa. You need a bridge. Okay, have a bridge. What's the things? Well, we'd like to get some preferential trade if we can, but this will be good. How about a road? Legacies are very different. So, I mean, we'll see. But America has handed over itself to the corporate greed. So I don't know if they're going to be able to get themselves out of that particular, like the same as when in the business, when you get the management consultancies in, that's when you start to hemorrhage money, So these corporate people in America will bleed the country dry. Same way as that they got the management consultants into the National Health Service in it over here. It will never work again. It'll never be efficient again because they just take too much money.
Well, I mean, the only solution with that is you do a reset, right? And to do that, you need some grown-ups in the room. You actually don't destroy everything. Check the foundation. If it's working, is it, oh, why did we plaster there with crap? Let's rebuild that section and let's imagine again. And I'm hoping this is what's happening around the world right now. We're now really at that inflection point where this ability for humans, particularly in America and Western Europe, to hold ideas of freedom and moral justice while also holding some very strange positions about the rest of the world together is no longer sustainable. This fracture has started, and I think the dialogue has started, and the reality is there for everyone to see. It's inconvertible, and it's so obvious now.
To some.
So a lot more than we think it is. It's just people still have to deal with their own truth making, right? So what this is all doing, it's reflecting to them a mirror of the work they have to do. People as communities, as nations, and it's hard work because it's demystifying a lot of stories and folklores that they've built for their own centuries about themselves.
Yeah, I think there definitely has to be an unpacking of the narratives that have been sold. And they're definitely these fabricated stories of who belongs where and who has a right to be, just to be, not alone to thrive or have some success, just how people should be left alone. And that, in the particular current story climate with the narratives, received narrative, is going to be very interesting because those who have been selling this story for quite a long time of the immigrant, of the stranger, of the other, of the outsider, are finding themselves to be the outsider. So it's going to have to change the self-talk quite a bit.
Completely. I completely agree. And that's where it's actually tough. And some people can handle it and are doing the work. A lot of people will perish because they can't handle it. And some others will stick to their position, hell or high water, right? But I think that makes them inflexible, rigid, non-life, like automatons. So they'll break, and to live, you have to be flexible because change is inevitable. And so fundamentally, I think to live successfully, there is hope change will happen in the way we want it to happen.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of fracturing there because the cognitive dissonance, those ideas hitting against each other. You can hold this idea as much as you like, but you're the one suffering. Your unemployment benefits gone. All the services that you, yeah, other people have got it, but when it's yours, when it's been taken from you, you're like, well, I have this idea and I'm really starting to suffer. What's going to crack first? Ideology or the lived experience? That's, as you say, that rigidity, that moment is going to be a very public and a very international thing. It's in the same way we were talking about the folklore of the APAC, United States, the American first people are starting to realize, wait a minute, we've got all of these issues here in America with our people, and we don't really like foreigners. Why are we giving all of our money to Israel? That's going to clash in a big way. So it will be interesting to see how people navigate those spaces and those who are crafting the narratives. How do they maintain this corporate position when all around them people are sort of like pulling the mask away? That would be interesting to see.
So what I'm excited about, because we've talked about home and all of folklore and removing the mask and really a kind of return to intimacy with the self, right?
Yeah.
And these are all major themes for artists generally. And I think particularly for you as well. Today, we had some things we wanted to kind of get out of you a little bit more for the rest of the podcast, which is just for you to tell us about your home, your studio. Can you describe it to us? And it's quite specific now because you moved to a new studio, you moved to a new home.
This is my home. My studio is now my home. And
Yeah.
today's the first day because we finally left the space yesterday. So bittersweet, but yeah, returning to a kind of minimalist space and how can I perform the same kind of work or produce the same kind of work in my home space, which is quite, prior to having a studio outside, felt I was productive in a different way. In a sort of shared space, as an artist, you become more public. You have a door that knocks. You have people that are coming in, and you could be in the train of discovery or unpacking, and that stops. So I'm kind of interested. Today's the very first day. of, my easel's just there. My computer table is now set up. So I'm very interested to look at the work that I like to produce. I have quite a bit of public work to deliver over the summer.
Mm.
So and I'm very much interested in having this dialogue with the public as a source of creating new work.
And coming from a domestic space, a very domestic space right now.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's a mixture of the two.
Yes.
From this very small little corner of my living room to these public spaces like the beach. I mean, one of the projects I'm looking at is making a sand city, which involves the whole town almost. And how does that contrast with these portraits that I'm making that are based around memory of the childhood experience? So it's very interesting to look at the two. Again, this is my first day at home, and I've tried to sort of have a natural ending of some of the projects that I'm working on. But there's this over of the objects themselves. Let me just show you. I've been making these masks. Pardon me. If I show them against my body, maybe you can see them. But these are all about a communal thing. It's a mask where all of the holes, like holes in the faces, are mouths, So it's about this chorus forming, these shared voices, being a community within oneself. The whole thing of a shared voice is often a more powerful voice. And the aperture of the mouth is on O. O is the sacred sound, But looking at how do I continue that? I mean, I can make some sculptures here. Again, it's just unpacking the things that I want to do. And my home studio will be depending on how I feel about it. I have a new space I'll be going to in about July.
Is that the collective will be
That's
moving?
the collective.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a new building being sort of developed. So it's just very interesting for me to just sort of unpack what I'd wish to create in this period. And home does become a sort of central part of that. Your studio in the home. I'll go back to a couple of steps where I was saying that before I had the studio, I felt I was more productive. And, I'd feel that because of the lack of interruption, because of being able to hold a thought for a very long time, but to sort of go to sleep and wake up with it and not having the spaces between the studio and home, or the home being in the studio. So it'd be interesting to kind of start looking at the work that I'll produce. I've provided myself a few canvases. I've got myself some clay and a bunch of paint, just so I'll see what that's going to make. The home and my story, again, when I was young, very young, I've just come off a series of workshops with a lot of youth. And part of the workshops were to have people held onto the narrative when they were 13, when a lot of people have the revolutionary turn in their lives. A lot of people just, if they're a writer or an artist or a carer or somebody who holds other people, often when they make that decision to pursue that in their lives. And sort of reflecting on that has afforded me a new look at home. So it's very recent. A new look at how I am. Am I holding on to a revolutionary moment now? Can I still be filled with that energy, driver, as a thing that allows me to socialize? Yeah, I've been able to have a practice where there's a very public element to it, which I'm very pleased and proud of. But also, can that small, private, innocent thing be reborn through this practice at being at home? So that's one of the thoughts I've been looking at. It's very recent. It's my first day crafting my little corner, having my acrylics to hand should I wish to, having my inks just there. As an artist who's sort of still developing a painting practice, what does that continue? And it's a practice that I'm happy to have a non-fixity with.
What does that mean? Can you
A non-fixity is like some days I feel figurative. I work that has the human figure. There's something that's recognizably human in it. And as opposed to work that's almost completely abstract or very minimal in that sense. Where do these things overlap? And can I have these things that are quite different, but still maintain my voice, my identity within them? So through the ceramics, through the mark making. For example, there are two bits of work. This one's 3 M's, Malcolm, Marcus, and Martin. And it's just using elements of their lives, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Marcus Garvey. And it's quite an abstracty thing, an expressionistic thing. Because this is a more recent work, very much about, the re-memory, the thing of that you did as a child gives you a sense of belonging and that people identify very much with, even though they're not the most detailed figures, a kind of looseness to them.
There's an energy to them. And I feel what you're trying to say is that there is pressure on artists or musicians, overall, people who are involved in cultural output to kind of maintain one sort of thing, right? You're reckless, you got to do that, and you just maintain that style, right?
Yes.
And it's a form of oppression.
It very much is. You've got the marketplace wants to have something that's very identifiably you, that they can say they want a Big Mac. Give them the Big Mac, not the pizza, not the jerk chicken flavor. They just give me the Big Mac that we can sell. And so there is that. So I don't have a gallerist, and I'm not represented. And those are also traps. Again, as you say, it forces that it funnels and silos you into a type of output that often traps the artist. Very much in the music as well, and it doesn't really allow growth. So I watched a thing of a hip hop artist, and he's in his 50s now. And he's still wearing the cartoon character clothes. He's still throwing up sort of gang singles, signs. Quite sad to see a guy who's probably got grandchildren and not being able to evolve to talk about his grandchildren, to actually talk about his life in a way that can give him more meaning, even in terms of how the air travels from his lungs, shapes his mouth and out into the world. It affords no space for gentleness, affords no space for kindness.
But I think it's the flatlining, right? I think that's where all the revolution or pushback is coming from, is this flatlining of the individual only as a consumer, or your output has to be automated in a way. Once you've developed something that was a success, then you automate that, so that... Yeah, and we are resisting it. All of us are resisting it who acknowledge that life is more than that and that we want to bring the kindness to ourselves, right?
But if you're interfacing with the machine, doesn't really allow for the human in that. It doesn't necessarily allow, because the machine only can sell what it knows is going to make some money, or that's easily distributed. If you're a musician and you're making 8-minute songs, the machine doesn't like you. Radio can't sell product.
And in a sense, then, for us to really live our folklore and participate and create, the physical has to be really part of it. I think, the machine is trying to remove that embodied experience, right?
Absolutely.
That's the resistance there that we have to have, is against that activity.
In particular, in this time where artificial intelligence, people are throwing everything into it. So the uniqueness becomes problematic because people don't ask for permission. So I could make a painting that's taken me half of my life to develop. We published online, someone will like it. Can you make me something like this, AI, but make people smile? Can you change? I don't like the reds in there, make them blue. And my uniqueness is gone. So a new battle with uniqueness and being able to stay whole, and also to be able to sustain oneself as an artist, as a creative. And that's it's always been difficult. It's always been problematic to sustain oneself as an artist. Yes, the push and pull of value has always been a thing. In this moment, it will be very interesting to see what the outcomes will be, because that landscape is changing very quickly. I mean, even from COVID to now, it's almost a different one.
But the machine cannot make this fully textured, real thing, can it?
I think that there's new bark compositions out, and they very much approximate Bach. For someone who's not familiar with Bach or with Mozart, who they can copy quite easily or emulate quite easily, it's quite hard to differentiate. Because the public has an appetite for this, and that appetite is often not very well curated as an individual. With TikTok and all of the other things, where things are short. There's a novel out that's made of tweets. Yeah, I think that could be like a one-off, because it's a very It's not a novel idea to make a novel.
But I think these are also old, these are old conversations repeating themselves in a way because it's about reproduction ad infinitum, right? And whether human art or human generated activity is also very much a spatial temporal experience that we all have in real time.
There's no way for the machine to produce those emotions. There's no way for the machine to reproduce those connections. And the conversation radically alters as soon as you mention the machine. As soon as you mention selling and capital, the conversation, they say that as soon as Quincy Jones said, as soon as you talk about money, creativity flies out the room. It's the first to leave. And there is something to be said for that. But as an artist who pays rent by monetization, it's always that push and pull. As you said so eloquently before, we can't be inflexible face of that because we will break. So there's something to be said for holding a part of the creative process and its interaction with people and that organic living thing, the meeting of souls, and then the machine, which is always a dead thing, because it's the very nature of the machine is that it is dead. You say it's cyclical, and I think it's cyclical, and I agree with you. I imagine when books for the printing press first came along, it was probably, this is the end of story.
Absolutely. Word everywhere. What do they mean? They become meaningless, right? That episode during the time when pamphlets were, everywhere, got that feeling that the same that we have with social media and what we're experiencing now again with AI.
I think it's the thing of when you talk about pamphlets as well, from the sort of the Gutenberg press and that kind of time. Literacy was a secret language, not everyone could read, and those who could read would often lever that knowledge. And I think that those who are creating the AI programs, the Spotify's of the world, are leveraging these things against those who aren't so familiar with it. And it gives a return, as you say, cycle, the return of the pagan, the return of the spiritual, the return of the wanderer, the return of those who want to be outside. So, we've noticed a resurgence in jazz because Spotify could only play that thing as it was recorded.
And vinyl, for instance.
And vinyl, yeah. So having the object, we used to own the music that we listened to.
But I think also maybe as a result of this automation and providing access to much more people, there has been an increased appreciation and cultivation by some people of new interest and deeper interest, and they're following their gut, and then they're going deeper and deeper and finding the art within. So it can also be an entry point for many people who otherwise may have been, that's what the power of the internet has been, right?
Yeah, and outside of that, people are looking for something that's just, something that's whole, something that feels real, something that is actually very much shared, and it's not a simulacrum. People very much are looking for that. Particularly where I live at the moment. I've seen people just singing to themselves on the streets, and the willingness for people to join in, just as passers-by. People are really wanting to have a human experience or a shared, experience of flesh. I'd say it as brutally as that.
Absolutely.
And there's a real drive for people to become their own curators, which is a very interesting thing, because in the art world at the moment, it is very much about the curator, not the artist, or maybe it's always been that way. But the curatorial practice, those who are the curators are doing very well, as opposed to the artists who are like, pick me, pick me. And again, the curators are the ones who are the gatekeepers of the machine. Again, there's that whole drive of people to appreciate stuff that they can curate themselves. It's very much a thing that's become more of the zeitgeist. And again, going back to that thing of a particular kind of justice, particular kind of honesty. Very much that thing, I think that, when you were speaking of your travels, a real democratization of the world. That people will see you as you are and not through the lens, not through a curated lens of the media and everything else. I think those times are becoming so much more important.
That's the paradox, right? Because the technology that we're talking about, which are the technologies of communications, while trying to standardize messages to create like standard consumers, are also creating tools for intimacy between people. So
Yeah,
if you wish to take that step, right?
those connections are almost like a byproduct.
But it fundamentally, but that's what it is, right? It's a paradox, right?
Exactly.
Is
Mm.
created the actual tool for connection, your aim was profit, right? And I think then that can become the subversive element
Very much.
in how we use that. And we're seeing it already, the kind of connections, people reaching out to each other, people may be interested in your art, reaching directly to you as opposed to through someone or via someone and I think those direct conversations are going to be the way of the future more and more.
And outside of mandated forms or ways or means of engagement, looking to engage differently. They're saying there's a generation of very particularly lonely, isolated people who are constantly looking for meaning. There's this outside of the norm. Some of that's like a post-lockdown thing. People couldn't quite connect physically in spaces the way that they used to. So in tandem with this isolation and loneliness, there's this real drive to connect differently and to connect more deeply. So that's a very interesting push and pull that's coming about.
I love what you talked about return. And I think, it's also a kind of memory, a deep memory inside of us of our humanity, of how to be human. It's that connection, that emotion, that beingness, that existence, that life force. And I think when we're being dragged away from it, the rubber band will snap.
I do feel that it relates to what we were talking about, what's going on in America. I mean, today they were saying that there's been 6,000 people who have come ashore at Dover. And people are turning around to be seeing that more and more that person could be them. The more that things are snapped away from them, almost the more inured they are on one level to seeing the bombs drop in other places and seeing that over a period of time, there is nothing left for those people where they are. And what would they do? Well, yeah, we're stretched, but we're not being bombed. And who are you ultimately if your compassion is only for those strands from different messengers and different messages are all going to be hitting home in a very unified way. In a sense, it's going to be inevitable, inescapable that this compassion thing is going to have to spread because people all have nothing.
And for me, it feels we live in such a mythical time.
Yeah.
The human battles or the struggles and these issues that we're facing are huge. They are the battles that we hear about. We are all on our hero's journey in a way.
I think also if we're dealing with the totemic nature of gods, so those who have at the top of the corporate ladder are seen as godlike figures, infallible. As the mask falls off these people and their admiration of those people is seen to be a fallacy. Again, the cognitive dissonance is going to hit, and people will be left with either their compassion or a wasting away.
Absolutely.
And everyone will wake up. I mean, that's inevitable. I mean, that's the KRS One saying is that everyone will wake up. Even if it's your last breath, you will wake up.
I'd love to end it there if we can, because that was perfect. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation just as much as we have. And maybe you've started thinking about what folklore means to you. Or maybe you are already participating in more than one folklore. We would love you to keep listening as we explore these conversations and ideas together. Please follow us on this channel you're listening on or any of our social media handles. And also, if you're interested in participating with us in this radio show, or if you have any ideas or feedback or comments, please do not hesitate to send them to us on towradio@towfestival.com.